And now for more on this, we're joined today by Dr. Paik Seunghoon, researcher at the Institute of Middle East Studies. Dr. Paik, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So confusion has been, mounting over the next round of talks between the United States and Iran, with Trump saying Iran has requested a meeting, but Iran says it won't meet with U.S. officials. What do these conflicting messages from both sides tell us about the state of the peace talks?
I'm sorry. So simplest way to put it is that channel remains open, but the diplomatic process has not yet become a stable negotiation. So I think the first point is that the two statements are not necessarily completely contradictory of both sides, because President Trump appears to be using the term meeting rather broadly. So from Washington's perspective, the presence of American envoys, Iranian representatives and Qatari mediators in Doha can be presented as a resumption of negotiation. But Iran is making a much narrow distinction. Tehran is saying that no direct high-level meeting with American official has been scheduled. So what we appear to have at the moment is indirect or shuttle diplomacy. So American envoys are consulting with Qatar. Iranian officials are holding separate discussion with the Qatari side, and message may be exchanged through the mediator. So there may also be lower level technical discussion concerning the implementation of the memorandum, frozen Iranian assets and maritime arrangements. So the conflicting message therefore tells us that diplomacy is still alive, but that the peace process remains a bit fragile and poorly institutionalized yet. So the two sides have not even reached a common understanding regarding the format, level, and agendas of the next round of negotiation. So there is also a domestic political dimension into it. So President Trump wants to show that his pressure that brought Iran back to the negotiating table and that he remains in control of whole this process. But Iran, by contrast, does not want to appear to have requested negotiation immediately after American military strike. So Tehran needs to demonstrate to its own public and political establishment that it is negotiating from a position of sovereignty rather than weakness. So I would describe the current situation as negotiation about the condition for negotiation. This is not yet evidence that diplomacy has collapsed, but it is a warning that the two sides remain far apart from over-sequencing, implementation, and political presentation.
I see. That's very good to hear. And these two countries have reportedly agreed to halt the talks. Is it fair to say this conflict is showing signs of de-escalation, or does the risk of renewed fighting remain very high?
There are certainly signs of tactical de-escalation. So the two sides have stopped the immediate cycle of strikes and counterstrikes. So diplomatic contracts through Qatar has resumed, and some commercial traffic has returned to the Strait of Hormuz. So financial and energy market have also reacted positively to the announcement that both sides would stand down. However, this sounds not be confused with strategic de-escalation. So the underlying dispute remains unresolved. Washington and Tehran have different interpretation of ceasefire agreement, particularly regarding freedom of navigation in Strait of Hormuz, Iran's authority over maritime traffic, and sequencing of American economic concessions. So the nuclear issue has barely begun to be addressed, while the Lebanon front remained highly unstable. So the ceasefire also lacks strong enforcement mechanism. So there is no fully developed joint mechanism for investigating incident, identifying responsibilities, and preventing an isolated attack from triggering another round of retaliation. So this is particularly dangerous in a crowded maritime environment where drones, missiles, naval vessels, and commercial ships are operating in close proximity. So my assessment is therefore that we are seeing operational de-escalation without strategic reconciliation. So both sides currently want to avoid a return to full-scale war because the cost would be enormous. But the conflict has not been politically resolved. That is the current situation that I could at best describe.
I see. And Earlier talks in Switzerland focused on Iran's nuclear program, and they will address this issue in their next round of talks. But the negotiations now appear to have sort of shifted toward resolving issues surrounding the Strait of Hormuz. What leverage does each side still have, and how do you expect these talks to unfold?
So, I mean, the shift toward the Strait Hormuz reflects the urgency of the maritime issues. The nuclear question is strategically more important in the long term, but it requires a highly complicated technical negotiation on enrichment levels, uranium stockpile, numbers of centrifuge, inspection procedures, and sanction relief. So, but the Strait of Hormuz, by contrast, creates an immediate economic cost every day that shipping remains uncertain. So, as we have witnessed, Iran's most important leverage comes from its geographical advantage. Tehran cannot defeat the United States in the conventional naval conflict, but it does not need competitive naval forces to close the Strait of Hormuz completely. So limited attacks, vessel sieges, inspection delays, mines, drones, and threat against commercial shipping can increase insurance premiums, freight costs, and global energy prices. So Iran has therefore demonstrated that uncertainty itself is a strategic weapon, their bargaining budget. So even a limited disruption can place political pressure on Washington and on energy important countries. So Iran also retained leverage through its nuclear knowledge and enriched uranium stockpile. Military strike may damage facilities, their nuclear facilities and nuclear capability, but they cannot eliminate technical expertise. So Iran can also influence other regional front, especially Lebanon, through its relationship with Hezbollah. So Iran has this kind of like a leverage against United States. Strait of Hormuz, nuclear capabilities, and capabilities of utilizing proxies. But United States, however, also possesses several powerful forms of leverage. First, it retains overwhelming military and naval superiority. It can escort ships, strike Iranian naval infrastructures, and support alternative navigation route through water close to Oman. This was the cause of this conflict. And second, Washington controls access to sanction relief, frozen assets, international banking, and Iran's return to global oil market because Iran oil has been sanctioned for like long period of time. So these economic incentives are essential to Iranian post-war recovery. So this could be a good bargaining chip and leverage for United States. Third, the United States has influence over Israel and the Gulf states. Although that influence is not unlimited, Iran wants Washington to restrain further Israel military action and to facilitate an arrangement in Lebanon. So the likely outcome is not a complete victory for each side. So this whole process will be the negotiation will probably process in stage. So the first stage will concern basic implementation, like safe shipping routes, communication hotline, procedures of approaching civilian vessels, and mechanism for investigating incident if something happened. The second stage will involve the political and legal question of whether Iran and Oman may charge fees for actual maritime services on Strait of Hormuz. And third stage will link maritime compliances to the phased release of Iranian asset and sanction relief. Only after a workable arrangement on Hormuz is reached are the parties likely to return seriously to the nuclear files and nuclear negotiation.
Right. I guess we'll have to see how the meeting plays out in Qatar. All right, Dr. Paik, thank you so much for coming on today. We appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you for having me.